Globalism, or collective unconsciousness, at the global stage. A sweeping contemporary feudal resourcefulness, or else the modern epic socialism. The concept of globalization is not a new one. The ancient merchandisers traversed vast distances on the globe to buy stocks that were rare and expensive for sale in their neighborhoods. The 19th-century Industrial Revolution introduced developments in transportation and communication industries that streamlined trade across borders. Today, the globalist movement has taken a new turn. It merely remains a sundry of strategies with scope beyond the solely international interconnectivity. Although it defines the interconnectedness of the modern world, and today's globalism may be primarily associated with world systems, it also represents other global movements. Globalism initially emerged as a robust set of doctrines in the late 20th century that contributed to the union of a connecting global concept. The contemporary globalist has other ambitions besides economic interconnectivity. It is about creating a global brotherhood under one universal collective consciousness. Since the appearance of the World Wide Web and the sweep of mobile communications and mediated connectivity, standardization has become fundamental to a consolidating global fantasy. The world's image hovering as a unique glamour against a backdrop of endless blackness forever altered how we perceive ourselves. We realize our small sphere, so connected to each other, yet we find ourselves very alone in the world. That made the idea of globalization a profitable reality in the eyes of the big industries. Although globalization today is promoted based on the collective conscience, some refer to it as the concept of collective unconsciousness. For instance, from the time of the Great Depression to global wars and the 20th century revolutionary movements determined the nuances of collective unconsciousness. The Cold War East-West crisis resulted in the extinction of communism and the triumph of capitalism under the neoliberal model of globalization. Globalization shaped the collective unconsciousness and dented individual free will. Today, amidst expanding globalization, people sell human organs as they once sold their family members to slavery. They still sell women in the Afro-Asian business of human trafficking. People even peddle their hardly used soul on platforms like eBay and Amazon for those interested in purchasing it for a few dollars. People sell their bodies and minds, their services that invariably entail surrendering their free will. With its populist economic and political system based on public ownership, socialism, also referred to as collective ownership of the production resources, in extreme form, communism, socialism treats everyone as equal. Once taken out of populist context, the contemporary globalist shifts the power from the geopolitical states and places it in the arms of corporate administration. Globalization has forced the following, supposedly, practical steps of capitalism and freedom and quality of life. Then it represents a step towards counterbalancing the world and its populace. The supporters of globalization believe it eliminates inequality by unlocking a door to a world without boundaries. That is precisely what makes globalization destructive. The European Union and Brexit happening are the embodiment of this utterance. The EU is an agent of control, and Brexit is the people dismissing its global mission. Globalism is the new socialism. It eradicates freedoms. By politicizing, remove ability and autonomy from every individual, conceptualizing the collective consciousness. The notion that we, as a society and a more comprehensive species, owe something to each other and work for moralities rather than reality. Globalism is 21st century communism. It invites a neo-feudal statehood ruled by a few corporate elites. The globalist schema is to create an economic policy that is close, mutually advantageous, supports monopolistic relationships between business leaders and government officials, thus forming what we refer to as crony capitalism. Corporate globalists have taken crony capitalism with the hands of neoliberals into the world stage. For instance, Carlyle's Investment, a global investment company, focuses on industries with a competitive advantage, in particular, federally regulated or impacted industries such as aerospace, defense. Its capital is tapped into 14 different funds, 7 focused on U.S. industries and real estate, 4 on Europe, and 3 on Asia. The $1.3 billion Carlyle Partner II Fund is the majority owner of United Defense, maker of the Bradley fighting vehicle and other weapons systems, and owns Vought Aircraft, the world's largest commercial and military airline parts supplier. Crony capitalism is broken socialism. From crony socialism to crony capitalism, everything within that spectrum is in the globalist curriculum of agenda. Crony socialism eliminates free enterprise, whereas crony capitalism does the same by substituting the common interest with special vested interests and domination through superfluous interventions. Typically, it uses the rhetoric of the global brotherhood to rationalize its undertaking. The serf of yesterday, the brotherhood of today, and globalism of tomorrow represent the chronological evolution of the original feudal doctrine. Bringing on a substantive connection between liberalism and feudalism, the increasing devotion to neoliberal ideology is currently going on as having the impact of organizing a scheme identical to feudalism, where the few rule the majority in the interests of the few. Such status arrives through consumption and market connections. Furthermore, the globalization of the American politico-economic model pledged to the expansion of the global neo-feudalism. That is accomplished primarily by employing transcontinental corporations. Unlike what is being propagated, globalism is not equivalent to global brotherhood. It is, indeed, a pseudo-Freemasonry concept that makes a multifaceted contribution to the globalization narrative, making the international process interconnected, creating a network that surpassed traditional boundaries. In the process, the notion of global brotherhood, just like its ancient model, still plays a role in the growth and operative of corporate empires instead of British and European empires of the old days. Globalization coincides with the era of the corporate regime. It destroys traditions, culture, and individual identity. It seeks to concentrate dependency on a single center point of dogma and, inescapably, a single ruling body with absolute power.